So, welcome everyone to the first podcast of DesignOps Aligned. I am honored to have our first guest on here, which is Darren Hood, professor and educator in UX, TEDx speaker, 28 years in human-computer interaction, 28 years in managing and supervisory, 23 years in multidisciplinary teams, 11 years working with global teams, global mentor and educator, also the host of the World of UX podcast, and also the owner of Kaizen UX. Did I miss anything in that large CV introduction?
That's pretty good. I think we can rest with that. I will mention one other thing. I did just launch a T-shirt line
Yeah,
because there's too many people that think that UX is UI, and so I've got a whole bunch of T-shirts and coffee mugs, everything. Just a fun way
yeah.
to get the word out about that.
No, I've seen it, and I'm definitely going to put the link up with the video. So,
Yep.
Darren, honor to have you. I think we reached out to you because you're very, very, how should I say, communicative on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We as Design Align really like the comments that are coming out from you and the kind of thing that you stand for. And one of the key things of our podcast today was to talk about UX professionals of
Yeah.
today. So I really, really want to just dive into it. I wanted to get your feedback. What is the current state of the UX market?
UX, the market is currently upside down. Is the phrase I like to use. And what I mean by that is prior to 2011, you had zero specializations, pretty much. If you were working in UX, you did everything. You did design, you did research there. Now, today you've got people that think that if you do design, you can't do research. And if you do research, you can't or shouldn't do design. But we used to do it. And the funny thing about it is that not only did we do it, we excelled. You didn't go places and see terrible experiences everywhere. The one major company today, just to contrast, I went to their nameless site to look for a refrigerator.
Yeah.
And as I went to search for a refrigerator, I went to the global where I thought the global nav was to click so that I could, because I shopped at this site, been shopping at this site for 15 years at least. I go to click. Where'd the global nav go? This is, I'm trying to make this a little bit more succinct because I get on my soapbox, as you know, in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
We didn't fail in our design. I mean, there's some failure, yes, but pretty much when you went to a site, you could find what you were looking for. Everybody I knew, you didn't ask a question in 2008 in an interview. Tell me a time that your work failed, that you did everything you could. You didn't get that question in 2008 because it simply didn't happen.
Yeah.
Now you get these, go to the one website, go to the global nav. They removed it. They moved it to the bottom third of the page, exposed. Who does that? That's not common convention. It's upside down because now no specializations. Now you have specializations. Now instead of paying one salary, you're paying 4 or 5, and people are not doing actual UX work. A lot of them are engaging in what we call UX theater. A lot of people they want the job, but they don't really want to do the work, and they don't want to be qualified. They just want to get the check. So everything, I mean, I could go on and on and on about
Yeah.
this, but everything instead of, and it's what I used to call pure UX, now we have what I call the cult of UX, and the cult of UX is now in control. So it's upside down. Everything is upside down today. It's not good, and in order to there's got to be X number of people dedicated themselves to pure UX and doing things the right way, which is going to take a lot of courage because also companies don't want real UX. That's another reason it's upside down. People are very quick. I've seen tons of folks hired for manager and director roles. And this is like maturing because it was like this, but it's far worse now. Going into leadership roles. It doesn't make any sense. And they're not going to hire people who are engaging in pure UX. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's upside down.
let me touch base on what you just mentioned. Like before, like back in the day, you know, people that went into this field were asked to do many things.
Yes.
And now we've become much more specialized. And, you know, your teacher speaks at all like UX is not UI. You know,
Yep.
do you think that it's the case that we went through that stage where everyone was doing everything, and now we're coming through to the point where people that want to be specialized cannot be specialized because they want to kind of do everything, and we've kind of made the culture into that where you kind of say, hey, if you are doing UX, you do need to have that UI kind of aspects to it. You do need to have that research kind of aspects into it. And do you think that we've kind of developed the culture so that people have to have all those skills in order to do one of their main bits of work? So if you wanted to do UX, you need to still have that UI kind of knowledge in there.
Yeah, and that's one thing I talk about that a lot, Naresh. It's great that if and I need to say this too. It's okay to be a specialist. Someone presented on my podcast once. They said something that was pretty strong, pretty true. They likened it unto the medical field. You have an internist that does everything, but then sometimes you need to see a specialist. From that perspective, it works. But also, if you go to the small town, you don't find specialists. So it depends on where you are. Now, that said, even if a person is a specialist, to your point, it's good to say you just want to be a researcher. I'll get specific. You want to be a researcher. But actually, the more you know about information architecture, the more you know about heuristics, and the more you know about usability, the more you know about the different types of research available to you, the more you know about interaction design principles, the better researcher you can be.
Yeah.
You can ask more poignant questions, more deliberate questions, more on-target questions. You can steer away from spending too much time on heuristics, because people who don't know heuristics, when they do research, they'll do research, and everything in their research script is revolving around heuristics. Well, you've wasted a lot of time by doing that, because heuristics, proven principles, best practices, common conventions. The only reason to research a heuristic is because you need that data to help manage politics and things of that nature. But if we already know that using a sans serif font provides more optimal readability, you don't need to test that.
Yeah.
You know, put it in there, but not to the extent people are. So being a generalist and building higher levels of acumen across different aspects of UX make you a better specialist. I think I said that the right way.
See, the reason why I asked that kind of last question was I've seen a lot of UX designers who come into the field, and I always tend to find UX designers nowadays tend to not use kind of like the basic wireframes. They don't use those kind of grayscale wireframes. In fact, I've rarely seen them use now. And I always think UX designers design in that front. Whereas you've got a UI designer who puts that kind of polish and kind of like makes the wireframes look good. And what I've noticed is that these designers now are not using the art form that was initially there. You know, and that's why I'm trying to ascertain, like, how can we get back to going to those raw conventional methods of UX where you don't make a prototype and crit, you don't get the buy-in from, you know, low file wireframes. You get the buy-in from the general understanding of the user experience.
Yep. And that's a fantastic point you bring up. Fundamentals. I have brought up fundamentals before on LinkedIn, and basically, I believe the word is castigated for having done so. Everything has fundamentals are the foundation and the place where everybody should begin. I think it's funny that you bring up wireframes, because a lot of people have actually abandoned wireframes, and that happened in concert with the fact that people interchange the words mock-up and wireframes.
Yeah.
So I had a job once that I said, "Do you need wireframes?" I'm trying to be a team player. I'll do the wireframes. I do the wireframe. And I'm like, you do know what a wireframe is, right? And you do know what the purpose of a wireframe is. It's to get buy-in. It's a communication method meant to get buy-in for the architecture of the experience, not the presentation layer. Somebody's going to take care of that later. Yeah, we know what it is. And so I just talked about this on LinkedIn recently. I produced the wireframes. The internal stakeholders actually had no idea what a wireframe was. They lied and said they did. They didn't wait for me to do a presentation to help make sure we were aligned. They went straight to an external client with the wireframes. And then, long story short, come back to me and say the client was underwhelmed by the wireframes. Are you kidding me? It's a wireframe.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just for architectural purposes. Are we set on the architecture? Are we set on how this experience will flow? I can walk you through it. This is not a wireframe is not, there's nothing pretty. I experienced it years ago at another company. I did wireframes and they got upset, talked to the account manager. This work that Darren did, I don't know if this is really going to work for us. I said, why you say that? It doesn't match this, that, and the other. He said, these are wireframes. What are you talking about? So thankfully, I had somebody to go to bat for me. Funny thing, I had somebody to go to bat for me at that point. Oh, that's what this is? And that's what, okay, we understand now. And then we went back to the table and we achieved success with the project. But I had somebody go to bat for me. In this other case, I didn't. Everybody was scared and they ran for the hills and they were in self-preservation mode. And I got thrown out as the sacrificial lamb. So fundamentals, wireframes, for people that don't know, is just for the purpose of getting architectural buy-in. And you progress, which is the second thing I want to address in what you said, is that the building block of the design process, people don't even know what it is. They're not being taught it in many educational resources. You start with the wireframe, you build from there, you move toward the presentation layer. And I love Jesse James Garrett, 5 planes. You start at one level and you work up to a presentation layer. Folks are jumping straight into the visual, not knowing that that's suicide because you're moving too fast. And that's partially due to the fact that, again, people don't embrace the fundamentals. They don't understand how important fundamentals are. They don't understand how operating every meeting, every presentation is an opportunity to drive UX maturity. And when you jump straight to the 5th plane, when you jump straight to the presentation layer without helping people to understand what's going on in the design process, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
And you're detrimentally impacting UX maturity. So folks, embrace the fundamentals. It'd be great if we got back to wireframes, even if it's just mid-fidelity. It doesn't have to be low fidelity, but mid-fidelity, but get the buy-in and then build from there.
Let me jump onto that point. Do you think that the reason why people don't go down the wireframe route is either two things? And I want to hear your opinion on it. One opinion I've always heard is that stakeholders, product managers can't think abstractly.
Bingo.
Using on the wireframes. Or number two, I've always heard is that the buy-in to get a design is always done from a visual point. So some designers, and I'm always trying to back up designers in their thought process. But some designers I've always heard is that they get the buy-in by using a visual cue to then sell some of their features or to get some of their design features in.
You're absolutely right. People have a hard time. We liken wireframes to a skeleton.
Yeah.
And the visual design to the body. The wireframe is the skeleton, the sinews, the muscles, the joints. Yeah. And if we were all walking around like that, having been exposed to what we've been exposed to, we would freak out.
Yeah.
If you got off a plane, all of a sudden everybody was. I think about that old cult classic movie, They Live, and they put on the glasses and they could see these, that kind of thing would freak people out. And that helps us, understanding that helps us to empathize too with our stakeholders and clients. They can't think abstractly. And so they have to have us walk them through that type of an experience. But the problem is, on top of that, a lot of what I call the posers, retrofits, and upstarts, and I added a 4th layer, the sellouts that have come into UX, they're addicted to aesthetics too. They're there's the cult of UX and there's the cult of aesthetics. And people they only buy in themselves. They're doing the work and they're aesthetically drunk off of aesthetics. And so they're not buying into the scientific approach of the science aspect of the design, which requires that we have building blocks and work our way up. So yeah, it's a mishmash of all of those things. The posers, retrofits, upstarts, and sellouts, all they want is for somebody to like what they did. They're trying to get somewhere fast. This microwavable mentality that we have. You're trying to learn UX in 6 months, and now you're trying to get buy-in in 6 minutes. It's not a good thing. It's not healthy. And again, lost opportunity to drive UX maturity because you actually push them towards more immaturity. You lean the scale in the direction of UX immaturity instead of leaning it toward a more mature stance, which is achieved one step at a time. But when they feed into the aesthetic mindset, you also feed into their biases because everybody thinks they know what looks good. And they also think that what looks good works good, which Don Norman talked about years ago in the design of everyday things. People see that and everybody can relate to aesthetics. But I mean, think about what Alan Cooper wrote about in The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. And he starts off the book with that morbid story about the airline that crashed because the dashboard in the airplane, the cockpit, didn't work well. Making it look good would not have fixed that and would not have saved those lives. So we don't succeed in design until we understand that aesthetics do not rule. They're a part of it, but they don't rule. And it's got to work, or else you're really deceiving your clientele when you throw something out there that looks good but doesn't do the job.
I want to touch base on two things that you just mentioned. One of them mentioning about people who have been studying UX for the last kind of 6 months. So you get these people who have been doing kind of online courses and, have come into the field and they're trying to kind of rush, as you just mentioned, to get like good feedback. Like that. Do you find that people that come from that kind of rush way of studying, in the sense of like, they're not really coming into the market with a scientific mindset? Because you touched upon a statement which I've always kind of been true to my heart. UX is not a artistic form, it is a scientific form. And do you think that people that have come in from that rush market are missing that scientific form? What's that scientific understanding?
They absolutely are. And that goes back to how they're learning to do UX. When people learn to do UX, they should understand. I mean, I did a talk, you probably saw it, design processes are overrated. But one of the things I said in the talk is that there's always a process.
Yeah.
They're actually it's all the different processes, design processes that are out there. I don't care whether it's double diamond or whatever it is. I put them all side by side, and you find out it's all semantics issue. There's very, very minimal to no differences between design processes. But one of the things you learn, no matter what process, I mean, even if you have no process, you'll still have a process. You're still going to approach it a certain way. They all take time. And learning takes time. I find it amazing that people say you can learn UX in 6 months. I've heard people say you can learn it in 6 days. I've seen people advertise courses. You can learn it in 3 days. No, never, 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 never. And the sad thing is, the people advertising this also infect stakeholders and clients because they think that it doesn't take anything to accomplish this. Because of that, it's like a vicious cycle of misinformation, if you will, from a standpoint of improper and inaccurate expectations. So the client thinks it takes no time. The stakeholder thinks it takes no time. All these people laying siege on and forging their way into UX think it takes no time. So yeah, of course, the people that are coming in, the newbies, think that it takes no time to actually, and so they think it's quick. And then they also think that we're order takers, and we're not. It's unethical to be an order taker. Well, I just need you to do this. Literally, I just need you to do this. So then they just go and do that. And they're not going to fight back. They're going to say, well, it's going to take a little bit more. Well, I need to do at least a little bit of research, at least some. to inform them. They're not going to say that because they've got their eyes on that check. So as long as the check keeps coming, they're going to do whatever the stakeholders, the clients, and these uninformed people running UX departments, which is also massive today. The volume of that is massive. So they're going to do that.
Mhm.
They're not going to do the ethical thing. They're not going to do the right thing. They're going to go the short path. When they go through these 6-month programs, they're only scratching the surface on all these topics. So they never really gain a proper understanding. They engage in faux projects that are nothing like the real world. And so they're also being infected with Dunning-Kruger. So a Dunning-Kruger mindset. So yeah, folks need to, in the learning, folks should understand it's going to take time. And you're going to have to practice this over and over and over before you gain any acceptable levels of self-efficacy and confidence. And if they start to learn that, maybe you'll see some change. But right now, we're on the microwave bandwagon.
There's something there's something I really want to delve into what you just mentioned. One of the key things that you just mentioned, and I think it's been a repetitive thing of people just want that paycheck. We're living in a climate where a lot of things are changing very, very fast. And I want to touch on two things with that comment. One being that, how do you get people to come back into this field and really show the benefits of true UX to stakeholders, to take that mindset that, these people are skilled in their profession, and they're very skilled in that profession. You have people who have studied and, have gone through the process. How do we get back to that aspect of teaching people to show the benefits of real UX?
Yeah. From a teaching perspective, the people who are engaged in education, there needs to be a commitment to, because education is a science also. There is a code of ethics associated with education. Education is being overrun with the same posers, retrofits, and upstarts, the same types of people who want to be involved in education, because a lot of them are after a check too. And they don't have many people. I mean, I know people who run UX programs who literally said, I want to bring in all my other buddies who got their PhDs and they can't find jobs. I'm going to hire them to teach in this UX program. You don't know UX, they don't know UX. And then you want people like me, this actually happened to me, to document my lectures, which I was doing from the hip. You want me to document my lecture, but it's not because that's the ethical way to proceed. You're doing it because you want to eventually run me out and hand my class off to your buddy that knows nothing about UX, who couldn't teach the class unless it was documented. So you have things like this that are happening. You have academia, elements of academia, sources in academia that feel like, accredited academic sources that feel like they're competing with boot camps. How can you? You're accredited. They're not. Anybody can get into a boot camp. All you got to do is pay the fee. When you go to an institution of higher learning, you have to compete with other people to get into those degree programs.
Yeah.
So now, how can you say that? You're accredited. You have to account to someone for the way that you're structuring your your learning experience. The boot camps are accountable to anybody. Any Joe Blow can set up courses on Udemy. There are people that are quitting their jobs after being in UX for a year, becoming full-time influencers and content creators. But they haven't even graduated from being entry level. All of these people are throwing videos up on YouTube saying you can become a director after 6 months. And it's like a Hollywood production for people to roll these things. These are the people that are educating folks. Real education is suffering because people think that I don't need all that. It doesn't take all that. So they're turning away from the viable sources to faux sources, to counterfeit sources, to go into really what amounts to counterfeit roles. All that said, the only way to do it right is for somebody, the same thing, a standard few people to stand up, determined to educate people the right way. And sorry to say, but one of the main ways the ship is going to be righted is that the failure of the posers, retrofits, upstarts, and sellouts is going to have to come front and center. The removal of the global nav from a Fortune 100 a company, the failure of that has got to come to the forefront. The poor experiences where people are designing something because they think that designing anything is success.
Yeah.
Where people are doing fake research. I had somebody ask me once, we were working on a research project, and they said, are we trying to address B2B or B2C? And I'm thinking, we're addressing users. And they didn't understand what I was saying. Find out who your users are, find out what it is they do, find out their pain points, find out the types of things that will help us to obtain actionable data that help us inform and improve and optimize the experience. I don't care whether it's B2B or B2B. In that conversation, that question was worthless. It was, what, you're going to take a different strategy? Or you're just going to find out who the users are and just go from there. But this person was following a textbook checkmark kind of an approach because they don't know the work.
That is a really good point. And I struggle actually to see designers actually cater to personas. It's one of the things I've come across in my career, and I'm not pulling out names, and I don't want to pull out companies, but one of the key things I've noticed is that persona research is kind of just like water off a duck's back. I rarely see designers utilize their personas in a way that's going to be beneficial for them. Now, what advice would you give to people who might be watching this podcast, and to people who are really looking at this podcast for kind of learning and really changing the way things are approaching? How would you inform them or educate them?
Personas are a fantastic way to approach design because it helps us to keep at the forefront the total purpose behind personas. I'm designing for this person. I want to keep this person in mind. Okay, now I want to pivot. Okay, here's another persona that I'm catering to. The design work for persona A? Does it work for persona B? Does it work for persona C, D, E, F, G, H, I? And you go down the line, and it's this kind of, I call it progressions. It's this type of cognitive design progression that we go through that helps optimize what we do. In our day and time, personas are getting a bad rap. And one of the main reasons is because people rush through. They never really learn how to do personas. They don't learn how to formulate the data that informs the persona. They're proto-persona happy. And another major contributor to the problem that personas present is that if you go to images.google.com, I always recommend that people do this, and search for UX persona, your page will, of course, be, I got to use the word, littered with examples of personas, and 9 out of 10, if not more, if not a higher percentage, are done incorrectly. There are marketing personas, and marketing personas don't inform UX work. And then there's UX personas, and a lot of UX people are leaning toward marketing personas. And so that doesn't help. It's not really, favorite brands. You'll see that a lot in a lot of persona templates. What in the world does a favorite brand do? How does it inform when I'm trying to evaluate a micro experience? The favorite brand doesn't help. It can help because you know that they like this brand, but then again, it doesn't change what the mental models are. It doesn't change the goals. The brand doesn't inform the goals. Not really. To a small degree, yes. To a broad degree, no. So I tell people all the time when I'm teaching my classes and I have people creating personas, when that's part of a course I'm teaching, say, please look at these examples, and please, here's a bad example. This is why it's a bad example. And I show them, don't do this. You want to document pain points. You want to document goals. It's the mental models that help us. Personas help us to achieve and understand things from a mental model perspective. It helps us to personalize what it is that we're doing. Or humanize, I should say. It helps us to humanize the work that we're doing if we use personas the right way. And again, If you approach it from a marketing perspective, that's going to be incorrect. It's going to yield an improper approach. So you want to do it the right way. And I got to give a shout out to Tamara Atlin, who created the Persona Playbook. You can go to Amazon or wherever you get your books and look at Tamara Atlin, and she's written 2 different Persona books that help you to build a science around how to do personas the right way. Don't follow the cookie cutter microwavable bootcamp approach, or you're gonna fall short. And a lot of people don't know how to write proper instructions too. They don't know how to step by step folks through how to do a thing. They tend to go to step 1, go to step 2, and then they get excited, they jump to step 6, and so now you've got an improper approach. So be careful of that also.
I'm gonna jump back on that one because I remember looking at your profile and I saw LX designer. I haven't seen an LX designer in a very, very long time. Very, very long. Do you want to explain what an LX designer is? Because I know it inside out, but most of the people that must be watching this podcast, they won't know what an LX designer.
Yeah, oh, you're gonna love this. I actually got my start in UX transition. I started off doing some freelance web design work in 1995, but I was doing all that work in the evening, and it really slowed my production or my own maturity because I was doing it in the evenings, doing it part time. But during the day, shortly after 1995, I became an instructional designer, and I achieved 4 certifications from over the course of the 5 years between 1998 and 2002. I achieved 5 instructional design certifications, including a master designer. And at the same time, so I'm doing instructional design training during the day, and I'm doing UX, what we now call UX work, at night. And these 2 worlds came together, and I started to notice a lot of similarities between how to optimize a learning experience design, which is what LX stands for, which at the time I was calling instructional design. I start to see a lot of similarities. I start to see the importance of doing a task analysis, doing a needs analysis that I'm doing for my instructional design work. I'm like, I should be doing that for my web design and UX work also. So I started doing that. I start doing evaluations for trying to make sure that the experience is appropriate. And I'm designing e-learning courses for one big corporation, for Fiserv Corporation, actually at the time, the people who were behind the arena where the Milwaukee Bucks play, Fiserv Corporation. I'm doing work for them, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, this is as I start to hear user experience more, studying more and more books, going a few years forward, I start referring to instructional design as learning experience because I see it's LX or UX as user experience. That's the moniker that speaks to 250 methods, methodologies, techniques, deliverables. I now refer to it as that. I start to learn about customer experience, CX. That's more of an end to end, the introduction to the brand all the way through the whole UX arena, and then into the customer experience, customer support, and then back into the purchasing funnel. And then I start to speak of LX. I actually think I coined the acronym LX. And I know some other people claim that they did, but I did, but I'm thinking this just makes too much sense. I never thought that I coined it because it just made too much sense to me. It was just common sense. So I never made an issue out of it. But I saw people claiming that they coined the acronym LX in like 2016. I was doing it before that.
All right.
So LX really is take those same a lot of the same principles we use in UX are applicable. They're cross applicable, I should say. So learning experience is really it's another way of referring to instructional design, but it's taking a lot of the principles that we look at in UX and then applying it to optimize the experience for learners, the same way we try to optimize the experience for users and customers when they're using a solution or a resource. It's the same thing when they're actually learning something.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think, LX, because I knew about it from a while back, you really do look into the core aesthetics and how people can read stuff or just generally learn stuff. And I think
Yeah.
this is one of the key things I think is missing from the general UX of today. I think if you build complex applications, you should be able to give that learning attribute into into a UX design process. You know, I'm always a believer in the muscle memory. Like once they've done it once, they will be able to do it again. But that learning or that first kind of aspects of when they see a complicated application, that's where LX comes into it. I really think that's been missing in the industry for a very, very long time. You know,
It is.
you have large applications that build tutorials, but there is an art in building a tutorial. There's an art in building an on-screen tutorial, and that doesn't come from UX. That comes from UX. Really, those principles have been missing for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and they're very important. I mean, there's an information architecture component.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing any form of e-learning. There's an information architecture. There's a cognitive load component. There's an affordance component. There's some semiotics that come into play. So yeah, definitely a lot of cross-pollination there.
Yeah. But you see, you've just mentioned like 4 or 5 key UX aspects in there, which today, and then, you know, I don't want to come across like I'm gaslighting. I'm you know, like I said, this podcast is not meant to be a gaslighting aspect. But I think one of the key things of today is that most UX designers are missing those key fundamental methodologies you just mentioned: information architecture, you know, cognitive overload, semiotics. You know, I think that's one of the biggest things I've been missing in a lot of people coming into that field, to understand the idea of you know, icons and symbols mean something in one thing and means something in else, and everything you put on the screen means something. There's a meaning behind it, and I think these are the key principles that I think have been missing in a lot of design aesthetics of today. But that doesn't mean they can't change. And I think one of the key things I want to how should you say preach about DesignOps Align is getting back to that. We need to get back to those kind of roots, and we need to get back to those kind of key things of what makes a good UX designer and what makes a good UI designer. I want to jump back a few steps. I know we might have touched upon this, but I think one of the key things I find in the industry, or design leaders in general, is again showing the benefits of UX. But what I've also come across, and I've spoken to a lot of people in this field, is that they are noticing some of that UX work or some of that design work is actually being done by other teams, such as development teams, or even product managers. I've even heard of people telling me that, hey, I had a product manager who just done a mock-up or just drew a wireframe and just told them go and polish it. And this is not a one-off thing. I've spoken to a lot of people as I've created DesignOps Align, and they have said they're experiencing this. What's your thoughts?
We have a big IKEA effect bias problem in the design world. And you have a meeting, you're working on a project. X number of people come to the meeting representing 8 different disciplines. Of each discipline that's attending that meeting with X number of representatives that might be there, we are always the baby in the room. UX is. We are the only one with roughly a 20 to 25 year history in this space as we know it. Only 20 to 25 years, taking root in the late 90s. So we've only been around for that long. We are also the sexiest. we're the one that everybody wants to be, and everybody wants to do, and everybody wants to contribute. But there's a metaphor that I like to use, and I said this on LinkedIn the other day, also on social media in total. And I used traffic, a metaphor associated with traffic. And I think we've all been in a traffic jam. We've all been on a freeway in the traffic jam. We've all been on the traffic, or we're traveling on the regular street. But there's something that you always have and people are going to recognize part of this as I get there, that if you want to get somewhere safe and sound, you either have to stay in your lane, or if you change lanes, you have to do it following a certain approach in order to ensure your safety and the safety of the drivers. To ensure fruitful progression, you have to respect lanes. In the design world, whether we like it or not, and folks don't, and you'll find the folks who don't like it are because there's something about that other lane that they find attractive. There's something about that other lane they want to be in. We're the baby in the room, and people are always trying to do our work. They don't understand it. They think that we're just UI people. They think we're there to put lipstick on a pig. They think that's all we do. We come in and we put makeup, and okay, even if you did that, it's still a pig. Nothing has changed. The pig just looks different, but the experience is exactly the same. And they don't get that. So in comes IKEA effect bias. So what is IKEA effect bias? IKEA effect bias is where people ascribe more value, better quality, and better execution to something because they did it. And this bias comes from people who buy stuff from IKEA, and you got to put stuff together. And so that's where the theory behind this particular bias came from. If you did it, it's better. Is it really better, or is it only better because you did it? See, that's that bias. So now you've got everybody forcing their way. I know I'm making this really complex, but they're forcing their way into your lane, and then thinking that it's better because they lent their 2 cents to it. And it's not true. It's the same. So everybody wants to design. Everybody, the example you mentioned, the product manager runs off and they throw something together and then they hand it off to the development team and want the development team to do it. Has that been vetted at all? We're experts in what we do, and somebody else is always looking at our work. How in the world is you Captain Amateur who just sat there and just and handed it off to somebody? No concern or attention to personas. No awareness, although they'll say, I know my users. How many times have we heard somebody say, I know my users, and research proved that they don't?
Yeah.
There's a world of micro experiences, and really the true competitive advantage is achieved through attention to micro experiences. Those little things. If you take a task and there are 8 steps in a task, those 8 steps are the micro experiences. The UX person is trained. We are the real UX person, the pure UX person. Let me say that. Is trained to pay attention to that one little that people are paying attention to because it gets their attention because it doesn't work. The user isn't even paying attention to it, which is why you can't ask them what they want. That's unethical too. You can't ask them what they want. They don't know what they want. You're behind the project. You don't even know what you want. So all of these things, we have to manage the UX person. It's really sad because in addition to doing our work, we have to manage politics. We have to manage bias. We have to make sure to keep our own biases in check. We have to advocate for the users. We have to find we have to understand business needs, and we're getting downloads about that. So we're finding the sweet spot between business needs, user needs, and constraints that are also being fed to us from subject matter experts. Our plate is full. Then you got these people that don't have the slightest idea what we're actually doing, barging their way in and creating more work. They're actually adding cost to what's being done because they don't know that UX people, the ethical UX people, the pure UX people, we're also doing things. We're considering how this can eliminate rework. We're trying to make sure that what we design is what's the word? Extensible. That is something that is easily modified going forward and will have a long life. I created joined with another, we worked together, myself and another UX person 14 years ago. We redesigned the information architecture for a major automotive OEM. Do you know that 14 years later, that information architecture is almost still completely intact? They've made very small changes, but we did such a slam bang job on it, such a phenomenal job on it, that we built extensibility into it that is still pretty much it's pretty much the same 14 years after we did it because experts were allowed to do it.
Yeah.
But if you look at people who just throw stuff together, like another company that we did a project for, but they took over and they wanted to ignore what we were saying, and even they had another company, a sister company, they put a logo for the sister company smack dab in the middle of the global nav. Who does that? I'll tell you who does it. People who don't know anything about design and don't understand the art and the science combo, and then the hippo who takes over, the highest paid person who takes over. That's the problem. So we get here and when we overcome these types of things, and it's the UX person's job to manage that.
Darren, always, I think when we connected, you have really, really good points, and you've been in this field for so long. And I think, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, like, if you're speaking right now to all the designers out there and all the people that are coming into this field and all these people that you have mentioned, what would be your lasting sentence or, advice to them to change up things that are happening in this market?
I'm going to refer back to, I did a talk, a masterclass for Interaction Design Foundation about personal UX maturity. Everything that happens, everything that each one of us affects in the discipline is associated with it ties back to our personal UX maturity. I'm going to recommend that people take a look at that you tap in, look at it. And if you don't have access to Interaction Design Foundation and you can't access that talk, there is an offshoot of that. It's something I refer to as the UX cycle of excellence. I did a blog post about it at uxuncensored.medium.com. I have a recorded talk twice that is on my YouTube channel, on the Kaizen UX YouTube channel. Take a look at that. I talk about the personal UX maturity because everything ties back to it. The more we manage our personal UX maturity, the more honest we are with ourselves, the more we labor to properly define and understand the discipline and ground ourselves in the fundamentals, it is impossible for us to not impact everybody in a positive way. So I challenge people to do that. You'll impact your teams. You'll impact yourself first. You'll impact your teams. That you become this epicenter. You impact the brand, your UX team's brand within your organizations. You help drive UX maturity of everybody you interact with forward. If you really, and that UX cycle of excellence is a 5-step process. And once you get past the first 2 steps, then 7 steps. And once you get past the first 2 steps, the next 7, you just keep doing this. But the last one is, please be patient as you grow. Please be patient as you grow in the discipline. You're not going to get anywhere overnight. 28 plus years for me, still learning, still finding things to dive in. Things, going back, reading a book that I read 10 years ago again. Because when you have changed. So once you read a book, it's not over. Go and read the book. Maybe there's a new version of the book, but go back through it again because you'll digest things differently. When we commit to continued learning and continued deliberate advancement of our own personal UX maturity, we do nothing but take the discipline forward. If more people did that, we would not be in the mess that we're in right now.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. As mentioned, everyone, I will post up all the links that Darren just mentioned. Darren, it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an honor speaking to you. I think somebody of your caliber and experience to actually come on this show and speak freely and passionately. It's an honor to have somebody of your caliber come on. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I always love the opportunity to share. Love talking about UX. I'm committed to taking the discipline forward. And please know, everybody, this is not about me. This is about the discipline.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And then, stay tuned in for the next show. And we'll be posting up on LinkedIn when it's up. We look forward to the next podcast. Thank you, everyone. See you later.
Awesome.